bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Well. Good evening, Fade to Black. How you doing? Today's Tuesday, June 4th, 2024. Let's do this, man. So ready for tonight's show. And last night, I'm just going to say this, Andrew Gallimore knocked it out of the park. That was an amazing conversation. We're going to continue that tonight with Freddie Levy, and we are going to talk about our ancient past and future interconnections. We've got a lot to talk about tonight, and this is going to be a great conversation. And tomorrow night, Susie Hansen is here. We're going to talk about her life of ET contact. And then Thursday night, Eric Altman joins us. It's an evening of Bigfoot and cryptids. A great way to wrap up the week. I want to remind everybody really quick, in case you haven't been paying attention to social media, our good friend, my good friend, Billy Carson was just on Joe Rogan. And I'm watching social media blow up on this. And so I want everybody to go check it out. He's somebody that has been very close to me since the very, very beginning. And this, it's just a really cool thing to see somebody like that I'm so close to get that kind of respect. So go and check out Billy Carson on Joe Rogan. All right. Now, I haven't talked to him since the show. I talked to him right before Rogan. And I thought, man, his already busy life is about to get crazier. And then, so I kind of let it go for a day, but the two of us were texting earlier today, and I just can't imagine what's going on right now in his world. But anyway, he's very happy. He's in a great mood. Anyway, so go check out Billy Carson on Joe Rogan. Okay. All right, let's get straight to it. I wanted to say, I kind of wanted to start with this. A few weeks ago, if you pay attention to my social media, you saw a string of posts that I did from my favorite spot that I ride to every day on my bike, my Harley, not a bicycle, and an investigation happened out at my spot, this little picnic place. It's just a tiny little picnic spot out by this lake about 20 miles from my home. And the police were there, and they were looking for a body in the lake. And so I went out there a couple of days in a row and met with the police and talked to them. They had a helicopter out there and boats and scuba divers and submersibles and everything. And it's not really a lake. It's more like a pond. It's called Elizabeth Lake. But anyway, I stopped posting about that because I went back out to the lake. The police were gone. The family was still there. And then the body was found while I was there with the family. And there was nobody at the lake. And the body was found by his family. And it was a pretty intense situation, and I didn't post anything about that. Today I've been out there, but I haven't been to the lake. I've been to the picnic spot. I've been just riding around it, I should say. But today I went back to the spot, and it was just a strange vibe. And I mean, for me personally, not a strange vibe at the lake or anything like that. But to think that something like that, something that tragic went down right there at that location where I was standing. And it causes you to reflect a little bit. It does. It does. How can it not? And I just wanted to share that with you because as I drove away, I'm thinking to myself, I'm on this gorgeous bike on this beautiful day, enjoying the world. And what's the difference between myself and somebody that falls out of their kayak and life is just taken just like that? What's the difference? And I don't know. I don't have those answers, but I certainly appreciated the moment that I was able to think about that. And you should too. All right. So I just want to share that with you. Just every minute is precious. Every minute of every day. And there you go. So that's it. All right. That's my thought for the day. And I just went through this thing. And I don't wax philosophy. I don't do it. I've started writing a book, and I swear there are moments when you're letting your mind go, and all of a sudden it's what comes out of your brain, and it's philosophical. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm not going to do this. Everybody's on their own journey. This is, or should it be there? And I'm constantly retracting that, and I'm retracting it now. This is not philosophical. It was just a moment today, and I'm sharing that thought with you. All right. Let's get to it. Speaking of everything is precious, tonight we're going to talk about our history. Freddie Levy is with us. He's live from England. And we're going to talk about those interconnections of our past, our present, and our future. Everyone knows one of my favorite things, one of my goals in life, and I'm checking off those bucket lists, is to go out and explore the world. And that's what Freddie does too as well. So what are those connections? And you cannot help but think when you walk up to an ancient site, some prehistoric situation, and you just look around and you go, what's the message here? What's the connection? What were they trying to save and preserve for us? What were they doing here? Everything is connected all the way through to today, and certainly into our future. Freddie holds a BA Honors in Classics from the University of Leeds and a PGDE from the University College of London. As a design and technology teacher with a flexible schedule, he has spent considerable time working abroad. That's right. He likes to scuba dive. He likes to go under the water, hiking and travel, and exploring ancient sites and cultures. That's what I do. That's what he does. We're going to have a great conversation tonight, and I would like to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black, Freddie Levy. He's right there live from what part, Freddie, welcome to the show. What part of UK do you reside?
London, the largest city. Yeah, I reside in Southeast London. I have done all my life, and currently this is where I am. I've got plans to be off in August to Mexico, where I'm relocating, but at the moment I'm in London.
Oh, you're gonna move to Mexico?
That is the plan. Yeah.
Wow. That's a change of environment. Now, I've been to both places, and you couldn't get two different situations. No. You couldn't get more different cultures and everything else. Exactly. But are you doing it for work, or are there other reasons?
Yeah, so I guess you could say there's one main reason, and there's an underlying reason as well. My partner has just relocated out there as well. She's a chef, so she is helping to start kind of Latin America's first zero waste restaurant called Baldeo in Mexico City. I was in I was fortunate enough to be in Mexico for around a month in January with my partner, and we loved it. We fell in love with it, and that's where she got the job offer. I have always wanted to learn the skill of regenerative farming and really kind of hone that skill. And I've found a few places in Mexico that do that. So I think from August for about 6 months, I'm going to learn hands-on the skill of regenerative farming, and then hopefully try and mold that into a curriculum for teaching for the other aspect of my life. So I would say there's a professional goal, and there's also a personal goal.
What is regenerative farming?
So regenerative farming is farming, but you are not extracting the resources of the local area to the point where you would then need to move that farm in the future. It's almost working in symbiosis with the local environment. There's another aspect to that where you can have vertical agroforestry, and that's another area of kind of regenerative farming, which is using forestry techniques by building up instead of out. So it's in areas where you have a little bit more restriction in your spatial requirements, you actually start to layer up. So you build up instead of out, and that creates a leveled ecosystem, multiple ecosystems. Almost, if you ever heard of a panicky style of kind of interrelation systems going up, it's one whole regenerative kind of plethora.
Kind of like what they've been doing in Peru for thousands of years.
The place where my partner is working, they're regenerating the old chinampas, the farmland in Mexico City, and they have a area there called Arca Tierra, and their slogan is "The future is ancestral." So exactly.
Yeah. I totally get it. One of the craziest things, and I've seen, just like you, I've seen crazy stuff. Crazy, you can't describe it. It's so crazy. But one of the craziest things, and my brain works in funny ways, right? And especially when you're at altitude. But anyway, you're at 13,000 feet, right? Wait, you're in the Andes, and you look around and you see these farmers farming these terraces up these, it's a wall, it's a sheer wall, and the terraces going up, and you look and you see the crops, and now you can look down into the valley below, right? There's dirt down there, right? You can grow down there, I guess, but and you turn around and you look, and these terraces have been there forever, right? They have been continuously grown, whatever it is, potatoes, whatever it is, corn, whatever, for a couple of thousand years. And they're up there, every square inch has something growing in it. And it's crazy. And it's not one spot. It's over the entire country. It's everywhere you go. It's absolutely incredible. Not only the engineering part of the terracing, but to keep the soil consistent and to continuously farm that for 100 generations. That's crazy to me. That's the way my brain works. I'm just like, that's nuts. Right? That right there is crazy.
It is fascinating. It's fascinating. There's a site in Peru that I visited called Moray, and it's a mind-blowing site because you're looking at it, and it's, if the viewers have not been there, it's essentially, I would say, I think there's 3 or 4 semicircles indented into the ground, terraces, concentric circles running down. And I was speaking to a local guide when I was there, and the locals believe the kind of tradition is that it was actually an impact site, and they harnessed
three impact sites. That Moray. Okay, so this is what. Okay, you have the dogma, the orthodox history, of what Moray is. Okay. I get that. I do. I didn't see that. I saw an amphitheater.
Yeah.
That's what that looks like. It looks like an amphitheater with a stage and the stairs, right? How about the stairs that come down in Moray?
With the stones jutting out of the side, and you've got to balance your way down. Fascinating.
Man, that's where you throw a rock concert right there, man. Pink Floyd plays Moray.
And, imagine.
So, but that's one of the pieces of they don't know a whole lot there. They don't. I understand why the history's so old, but that those were meteor craters. Yeah. And on the top of this mountain, and there's 3 of them, and there's the one main amphitheater. I call it an amphitheater. When you pull up and you see that, if you don't have a holy crap moment,
it's breathtaking. It is breathtaking, and the surrounding scenery on its own is breathtaking. You've got the kind of landscape, the mountains going off in the background, the plains behind you. It's fascinating, and obviously, it being a meteor site opens up a whole boat of questions about the fertility of the soil. Does that have anything to do with the impact, and when was the impact? So I think Moray as a case study is fascinating because we don't really know what it was. They certainly used it to they described it to me as they used it as a laboratory for testing out certain seedlings and certain crop ratios, but maybe that certainly was the case, but what was it before? What was it after? Who knows? And you mentioning, Jimmy, about how it looks like an amphitheater. The Greek amphitheaters are fascinating. I've got a feeling the Greek amphitheaters, some of them at least, some of the older ones, weren't originally designed as amphitheaters. They were designed as something else that then were later, because of the shape and the size, taken on as amphitheaters by the Greeks. But maybe we could get into that a little bit later as well.
That's fascinating. That's a fascinating thought. With a site like Moray, and we can circle back to Moray in a bit, because I don't want to get too far ahead of our skis.
Of course.
But out of everything in Peru, which is full top to bottom of crazy, right? It's just everywhere you go, it's just something crazy. But Moray blew my mind because people talk about Machu Picchu and Ollantaytambo and Sacsayhuaman. I get it, I understand. Moray is off the beaten path. The road up there is like, I've seen that TV show, World's Most Dangerous Roads. They tape every episode of that road to Moray. I mean, I have never experienced that. Was the funnest ride, right? Yeah. You have to have a really good driver and a lot of trust so you don't lose your mind, because you're doing hairpin turns on the side of cliffs that go down thousands of feet. And it's just crazy. Anyway, a single lane road, right? Oh man. Anyway,
they don't drive slowly either.
They don't. No, it's Formula One stuff, man. Fishtailing. It's so much fun. But when you get to the top, you realize how isolated it truly is. So to have that be a significant agricultural testing center for crops, no. It fits their history and the way that they want the world to believe it. Okay, all right, but no. That's not what it is. It's not, and it's beautiful, man. Why would you build something so architecturally, aesthetically perfect for crops? What?
Yeah.
What? No. It's as beautiful as the Parthenon. It's as beautiful as a Michelangelo sculpture. It's like that. I mean, it's of that quality. For seeds, I'm not buying it. It's an amphitheater. It's a really cool amphitheater.
An acoustic device. 100. I can see that. 100%.
Yeah. You stand up on the edge. It's a quarter mile down, right?
Yeah.
And you're looking at the people. They're this big, right? And you can hear them talking.
Yeah.
You can hear the conversation. It's absolutely incredible. Okay, so now let's back up for a second. There must have been a moment for you where you connected a couple of dots first, right? That first moment. What was that?
Well, if we're going to back up all the way, I'd just love to say thank you so much, Jimmy, for having me. I was supposed to say that at the start and I didn't get the chance, but thank you so much. You and Michelle, your publicist, I really appreciate, obviously, this opportunity. So thank you so much for that. This is the first kind of long form conversation I've been invited to. So this one will stick in my brain forever. So I guess I think as most people coming into this area, this space, kind of in my generation, maybe a few generations before, Graham Hancock, Magicians of the Gods. I remember reading that. I think I was around 18, 19. I'd been fascinated with ancient history. I was lucky enough to do a classical civilization, ancient history course at high school. I guess it was your equivalent to high school, secondary school here, sixth form. And that introduced me to kind of the mainstream view, I guess you could say, about it. It was very orthodox. It was looking at the temples, the layouts, the columns, the friezes, what that means. We were looking at the old literature, the Odyssey, the Aeneid, the Iliad. And then I went to university to study classics and I ended up reading Graham Hancock's Magicians of the Gods. And that was, I would say, the thing that kind of opened my perspective to a new view on history that just I hadn't thought about before. So they say we stand on the shoulders of giants, and that was the kind of giant that I was standing on. But I would say I've always, since as long as I can remember, I've always loved writing, and I've never liked writing about kind of orthodox mainstream subjects. I've always loved speaking about and writing about kind of alternative theories. So for as long as I can remember, I was filling up notepads about cryptozoology and cryptids. But then I always had this tension between the kind of the new and the old. So I was also filling up notepads about gadgets and I was drawing out diagrams. So, and this was back when I was just learning to write. So I've always had this, I've always loved the kind of tension between the old and the new and the kind of fringes of both of those areas. So I think I've always had that tension there, but I would say the catalyst was definitely Magicians of the Gods.
And so as you, I love that. And there was, I'll just say this little anecdote. Graham, there is a video before Graham was Graham. Okay. And he was onto something. And he was, he was a journalist and he's writing for, whatever, he's a travel writer or whatever he was doing. But he put together this video chasing down the Ark of the Covenant. And the one where he goes to Ethiopia, right? Yeah. And he finds this drum in this storage warehouse at this spot. And that was the Ark. Okay. Now it's not that he was right or wrong. That's far from the point. The point is he's thinking away from everybody else. And that when you, and I'm bringing this up because of what you just said, and it's such an important point for anybody, is that think differently. And when you do, you're probably closer to the truth than what they're teaching you in school. 100%. And that's the crazy world that we're in right now, where you can just like look at something, have something connect in your own head, and as crazy as it may be, it's probably more true than what is being taught. And that's what Graham showed us. Go watch that video. He's a kid in that video, by the way, and considering now, where he's at, but go watch that video, and he's just following the breadcrumbs, and he ends up way outside of the box, and that is the way his brain works, and that's what we should do more of. It's just go outside a little bit. 100%. Just go outside.
Out of the box thinking. Yeah, 100%. I think it's so important. I think certain fields, they get caught up in the minutiae and the details of those fields, and it sometimes takes an outside perspective, someone that's not kind of mired down with the overloading information in that field to see a connection to push that field into another space. It doesn't happen all the time, but I think when it does happen, it is usually an outside perspective that pushes it further. So yeah, I completely agree.
Okay, how far back? So let's talk about your 4-letter little thing here, which is a reference to interconnections with our ancient past, present, and future, and those interconnections. Where did you come up with that, and how far back when we're on the ancient side, because we have 3 categories, right? But how far back into ancient history do you take this?
I guess I should start off by talking about the reason why I think it goes quite far back in history, and how I kind of got to that conclusion. So the idea centers around kind of network theory, looking at the most simple explanation, point, the connection between the 2 points, right? And then over time and over space, more connections appear, more points appear, and then mapping those connections and those points. That's the simple version, because obviously history and human culture is very complex. So each point could contain a countless amount of information about a certain subject, about a certain culture, a point in history, okay? Where I like to use this kind of historical network theory is looking at how information has gone from the furthest point in history to the most recent point in history being present. I believe that there's a possibility this kind of an information network has existed for tens of thousands of years. I would say well up to kind of 40,000 years plus. And I guess we can get into the reasons why I think that, but I believe that quite possibly, like a few other researchers, this isn't new to me. I'm not claiming this as my own theory. I believe that this information network originated from not just Homo sapiens, so not just us, but possibly another hominid species as well, possibly multiple hominid species. And I believe you played a clip at the start, at the introduction, and it was something along the lines of, if a UFO was to land, the people would forget all of their differences, and that kind of denotes a connection. So I feel like if we were to truly understand how interconnected our past has been, and then it goes through fluctuations like everything does, but I think understanding how interconnected our past has been, it will help interconnectors going into the future. And at the moment, obviously, looking at what's going on in the world, having a global philosophy of interconnection, some might argue is a good thing. Some might argue is a bad thing as well. I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about how interconnection is possibly detrimental, but I think he was talking about social media interconnection. But I believe that understanding how the ancient past was so interconnected will help kind of moving into the future, into a new kind of era, as I should say. Yeah.
When we look at something that suggests a 12,000, a 15,000, a 20,000 year backwards timeline, most anthropologists and archaeologists and so forth will turn around and go, no. Are we talking Ice Age? Before the Ice Age? Before? No. There's no conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want to consider anything once you go past a certain point, which, it's 10,000 BC, right? Yeah. Anything before 10,000 BC, no, there's no conversation. But certainly there is evidence everywhere that does push those dates further back. But there's a line in the sand. Why is it that nobody wants to, in a professional sense, consider pushing things back? That it's just Stone Age man, and that's it. Hunter gatherers, and there's nothing to discuss. Why is it so closed down? You're a teacher. This is what you do. Why is it so closed down?
Do you know? I think it's very complicated, obviously, but I think part of it boils down to this idea that we can have Dharma, which is kind of the traditional sense of epiphany, and we can realize a key piece of information which opens up a doorway to something else. So that's Dharma. And very quickly, Dharma, because of how powerful it is, becomes dogma. So we start to teach just to that Dharma, just to that epiphany. And when we're researching such old periods of time, really old, it's hard for us to fathom. We have, let's say we're very lucky, 100 years on Earth, right? It's so hard for us to fathom 1,000 years, let alone 50,000 years, let alone 100,000 years. That moves into more of like a geological time scale, whereas we're living in this sort of thermodynamic biological time scale, which is very hard for us to kind of move out of that. I also think with the Dharma to dogma transition, funding is very important. Funding is a major part of this, especially in fields like archaeology, which I studied at uni. I did courses in archaeology. I took it further when I left, and I started doing courses on my own in archaeology just to understand it a little bit more. I honestly think one of the main issues is funding and the funding sources of where the money is coming from. I think that maybe plays a part in it as well. And humans are just messy. Ego gets in the way. A lot of times people do not want to be wrong. If they have come up with a theory, they kind of get married to this idea of the theory, and they don't want to let go of it. And there's not that many archaeologists in the world or anthropologists, so it can be a little bit of a niche subject. So I think if you work your way up to the kind of top of that hierarchy in the niche, once you're in that position, it's very hard to let go of your ideas and kind of that position. So I think there's a lot of things that go into this issue that we have of kind of narrow-minded, can lead to stagnation, things like that. You were saying, obviously, I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher most of my professional career. I started teaching when I left university. I started teaching in Hong Kong, teaching English out there. Then I kind of moved around to a few different places, ended up coming back to London to pursue that full time. And I've been doing that since. I would say one of the hardest things about teaching is teaching epiphany. You want to teach an epiphany. You want your student to get that moment where you hear it, you hear their brains turn. And it's one of the hardest things to do as a teacher because of a whole host of reasons. And I think also that may play into the kind of stagnation and narrow-minded aspect of a lot of these fields as well.
Yeah, I love the feeling of an epiphany. And I try to repeat that feeling as often as I can because it's just glorious when it happens. You know, I mean, when you truly go, it seems like I say this more and more on the show. I don't swear on this show, okay? but if something makes you go, holy shit, that whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
I love that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I love that feeling, and it's everywhere. It doesn't matter where you go on planet Earth. There is something there. There is some site that nobody knows anything about. I've been there. I've been to these sites where nobody can explain anything. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. And it's so big and so crazy and so beautiful and so perfect that you're trying to picture them building it.
Yeah.
Right? Now, you can't picture how do I say this? You can't picture modern equipment doing it. You can't. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. That's an epiphany. That's what students need to know. They need to understand that aspect of it, that, the world isn't what it seems to be. Now, go off on your own journey. Go do that, right? Go question everything. All right? Don't even believe me. Just believe me, right? And go and have that holy crap moment. I love that. And you're right. You're right. To teach an epiphany or to show an epiphany to somebody and watch them light up, best feeling in the world.
100%. I think we can teach to the curriculum, and then we can also teach to life. I think that's quite an important part of teaching. You obviously have to teach a certain amount to a curriculum because that's what they get graded in. That's how they get their qualifications. They need to know a certain set of knowledge to pass those exams. And that is good. It shows them a certain perspective of the world, but you also need to teach to life. And I think one of the ways of teaching to life is to show them that there is more to the world than it seems at first. And one of the only ways that they will understand that for themselves is to get out and travel. If they have the means to do so, travel, even if it's not abroad, even if it's local. Just go and visit some ancient sites, just go to visit some historical places, go talk to people in those areas. I think that really benefits a lot of people, and it seems like a simple solution, but it's a solution that, looks, chatting to some of the students that I teach and some of the adults I know as well, it's not something that's done often, and it's not necessarily their fault as well. They don't have the means to do so. It's generationally, it's not really the norm. So I think it just takes a little step outside of the kind of box of what they're living in to kind of open that world up. I was listening to you on, I think it was Ron Kill recently, and saying you visited how many? I've got it written down. Was it 7 countries in 12 months or something like that in 2013? He was visiting with these ancient sites. So
yeah.
When I heard that, and I think you'd just come back from Egypt and you've been to Peru. And when I heard that, I really thought you are out there doing that. You are out there kind of stepping outside of the box. It's not easy to do. I mean, but Freddie,
here, this is when, Peru's amazing, Egypt is amazing, the UK is amazing, Scotland's amazing, Mexico's amazing, Central, South America, crazy stuff for sure. You can go in your own backyard, whatever county you live in the United States, you can go and find petroglyphs. You can go and see something ancient. And one of the people think, the oldest thing we have here is McDonald's. Well, yeah, that's kind of true, right? That's kind of true. But right out here at Boulder City, on the California Nevada border, there's a town called Laughlin, and across the river, I think it's the Colorado River, whatever the river is, Boulder City. Right there, a casino. You jump on the road, you go across the bridge, you drive 2 miles, 2 miles. You can see the casino, right? You turn around, you can see it. It's right there. And the biggest petroglyph site in the United States is right there with 750 petroglyphs. And there's nobody knows where they came from. The Mojave Indians, this is in the Mojave Desert where I live, and the Mojave Indians go, don't know, man. They were here when we got here. And so you can go to see something like that nobody knows the history of. Yeah. And it's one of the most, that's the epiphany, right? Yeah, you can do it anywhere. Okay. Let me ask you this. What's your favorite site? Do you have a I know people ask me all the time. That's my same answer. But do you have a favorite site?
Do you know, I do. It's in Peru. It's Ñaupa Iglesia. I might be saying that.
Man, I've got pictures. Okay, all right. Can I say this?
Yeah.
Out of anything that I expected you to say, that was not on the list. Because that's a tough site to get to. It's a tough site, and it's a heck of a man, right? The stairs going. Whoo!
Yeah. And
but I saw God when I was in that. That was, my goodness, man. That is about as powerful spiritually. And so why would you pick that? That's awesome that you did. I've got lots of pictures, by the way, and video.
Well, I think you saying you saw God kind of sums up the reason why that is my favorite site, to be honest with you. The fact that me and you were separated by space, okay, and we're separated by life experiences, and we've both been to that site and experienced something. This might get into something we can touch upon later, but there's something palpable at these sites, at most of these sites. There's something, I mean, energy is a little bit of a buzzword. You don't want to say there's an energy to these sites, but I mean, for lack of a better term, there is a sort of energy. I've written about it before in an article series called Doorways to Nowhere, and I described it as an energetic intelligence. There's something there, and I believe the ancient people understood what that something was a little bit better than what we do now, and maybe that is because it's been lost through time, or technology has kind of blurred that lens. And we can also get into that a bit later, because I think technology may also help us see that energetic intelligence in the future. But Ñaupa Iglesia is just an absolutely fantastic site. For no one that's been there, it's in the kind of middle of the Sacred Valley in Peru. It's edged on both sides. It's in the middle of a kind of valley ravine. There's a river running through the middle and old train tracks. It's quite difficult to get to. It's a bit of a drive out of Oriente Tambo. You have to climb a set of very, very steep stairs going up, and they're extremely old, very, very steep, very, very unsecure. And also, one of the things that I didn't realize, there's those flying fireflies. They're not fireflies like I would know it, where they light up. They're aggressive. They're very territorial, and they're covered. They're covering those mountainsides. So you've got to watch out for the height. You've got to watch out for the local insects as well. And then when you summit the site of Ñaupa Iglesia, immediately you just know that something special is happening there at some point. There's a kind of doorway to nowhere carved in the middle of this rock face. It's I don't believe there's anything behind that doorway. I think the Spanish tried to blow it up with dynamite to see, and they failed to make even a real big dent on that doorway. There's a mainstream kind of opinion on it. It's like a shrine at the front that's overlooking the valley. It's precision cut. It's was once obviously a whole piece. It's been blown up since. I would say that site to me stands out the most. A, because of the energy. B, because of the journey that it takes to get there. And C, I was reading, I believe it was a Peruvian cosmologist called Salazar, and he was saying how I'm going to call it a shrine because I don't know what to call it. The megalith that's there.
Okay, so I've got some here. Check it out. I've got some pictures.
Yeah.
This is okay. So this is the cave of the church looking out. So, but let's get to the megalithic part that you're referring to, Freddie, is right here. You can see my arrows swirling around. And so anyway, I don't know what this is. Okay, so this is going into the cave that is sealed up. You can't get back there.
Yes.
And that's pretty trippy. And I tried to we did a whole ceremony. There's that. And if that isn't megalithic, there's Brian Forrester sitting right there.
Oh, amazing. Wow. Very
and
cool.
This guy right here, Paul, he got married up here. No, and that's a whole, okay. So here it is. Okay. So this is what you're referring to. And now I sat here during the ceremony. Now I want everybody to understand this is at the top of the Andes Mountains, as you can see. This is a valley, very steep cliff that you climb up. Just like what you're seeing on the other side. That's what's over here on this side. But anyway, in this cave is this single piece of granite, and it's carved into 3 positions. And you can see it here. It's position 1, position 2, and position 3. And okay, so we went through and did the ceremony. I stood here during the ceremony. We had somebody here in the middle, and our shaman did the entire ceremony. I'm standing here overlooking this sacred valley during the ceremony with my eyes closed, and it happened. Yeah, man, it was really, really cool. But to think that it is so beautiful and so old and so perfect. This is really big. I can't put
your hands on there and it's still engulfing you. You can put, there you go. Yeah.
It's pretty magical.
Just on a side note, the megalith there, it holds a lot of similarities to some of the kind of pre-Roman megaliths in Italy. I've seen some pre-Roman megaliths in Italy, not in person, only on the internet. So obviously there's some validation issues there, but it holds a lot of similarities to some of those kind of megaliths as well. So it bodes the question, what were the ancient people tapping into? What was that energetic intelligence that they were tapping into?
100%. Continue. 100%. I couldn't agree with you more. All right. So, let me just say this in this picture here, so everybody understands. Above this sign, above this at the top of the picture, that's where this cave is. So that's where you hike up. It is the most treacherous. I got to tell you, I was a little apprehensive. I was like, that's pretty steep. That's pretty high up there. And I'm thinking to myself, I could probably get up there. Coming down is going to be quite the freaky experience. But anyway, that's where it was. It was.
It's a fascinating place. It's a fascinating place. Me and my partner were lucky enough. We had a local guide. He was a brilliant guide. He took us up there, and then he actually left us up there, and we were there on our own. And I mean, two things. We had to make our way back down on our own, which was another story, because there's a few different pathways you can take. And me being a little bit nonchalant, I ended up taking the wrong pathway down. So my partner was not too happy about that, as we were kind of scaling this cliff, getting attacked.
Here I am on my way up. That's like halfway up, and you can just see in the background. This is like no joke stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, let me pull this down.
The kind of thing that, so I actually wrote about Nahu Iglesia in 2020, and I've never been there before. I just wrote about it because it had a connection to a site that I was writing about in Sri Lanka called Sigiriya. And the reason why I saw that connection was because of this Peruvian cosmologist. I believe he works for the observatory in Cusco. He pointed to the fact that there's certain points on that megalith that align to azimuths in the sky, which essentially means that the angle that that point is carved into the megalith at a certain point of the year points to a celestial object in the sky. I believe he was thinking it pointed to the Taurids, which is the meteor stream that we pass through twice a year. I couldn't find much else on that, but I just thought that kind of connection with azimuths. So you can imagine if you're facing a certain angle. How can I do this on my screen? Facing a certain angle, and this is the angle that the megalith is aligned to. Then what you do is you pan out, and the space between those 2 degrees is your azimuth. And then you can go up and you can point to a celestial object. And what that does is over time, it allows you to track a celestial object in the sky. So I just found that fascinating that I believe his name was Salazar, connected the megalith at Nahu Iglesia to an azimuth alignment. I was in Sigiriya. I was in Sri Lanka at Sigiriya in 2019, just before I really started publishing my articles online and getting out to ancient origins and just starting to write down everything that had been in my head for the past 10 years. And at Sigiriya, have you ever been to Sri Lanka?
I haven't been there. I do have the image here. So let me pull this up for you. Okay.
Oh, so I forgot I handed that. Yeah. So this is based on the work of an Italian physicist called Amelia Sparavigna, and I read a article that she had posted based on the alignment that she believed was deliberate of Sigiriya Rock in Sri Lanka. Now, I'm just going to rewind a little bit just to give you some context about Sigiriya Rock. Sigiriya Rock, I believe it was said to be inhabited. I'm not going to say built or designed, but I'm going to say it was believed to be first inhabited around 400 AD, late 400 AD, by a Sri Lankan king called Kashyapa. The story goes that he had just killed his father and he was on the run. And so he fled to Sigiriya Rock. And if you have not been to Sigiriya Rock, it's hard to understand the kind of the enormity of the site. I believe it is, I've written it down, so I believe it's 180 meters high. Okay, so that's like 600 feet above the ground. Okay, it's massive, right? It's a natural kind of geological formation, but the point that's interesting about it is the citadel that sits on top.
It's
now,
crazy. One of the most astounding constructions, no matter what period on planet Earth. It's absolutely might even be crazier than Meteor in Greece.
Oh, I've not seen or been to that one, so I'm going to have a little look at that one. I'm going to make a note of that. Is it
Okay, so
meteor as in-
yeah, well, that's where the word meteor comes from.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
fascinating.
yeah. It's a Greek word. Okay, so back to Sigiriya.
Yeah, so just committed a crime, the king Kashyapa, and he's fled to Sigiriya. Now, the story goes that he himself built the citadel on top of Sigiriya, having gone there in 2019 and tried to traverse to the top. It is very, very difficult, even with the modern metal staircase that's put in place. I could only imagine, I can't imagine, to be honest with you, how they would have got up there, let alone created an architectural masterpiece at the top of this massive geological formation.
Did you make it to the break station halfway up?
I did, yeah.
Okay, you got that far. Okay,
I got all the way to the top.
oh, you went to the top. Okay,
Yeah, I went to the top. I went to the top. Earlier that day, I'd been up. Me and my friend, who I was in Sri Lanka with, we had gone to the top of Pidarungala Rock, and we'd watched that's an adjacent rock to Sigiriya, and we'd watched the sunrise over Sigiriya Rock, and it was perfect. The sun rises exactly over the rock. It's honestly magical, which got me thinking of alignments. And then when I got home, I started looking into this. So at the top of Sigiriya Rock, I don't want to call it a pyramid, but there are step terraces at the top of the citadel that start to bear resemblance to a lot of the kind of stepped pyramids in Mesoamerica and Mesopotamia, some of them actually. But it looks like it's undergone a lot of weathering and a lot of reconstruction. So the story is that Kashyapa fled to this rock formation and he built his kind of pleasure palace on top. What I really believe happened was there was already a settlement on top and he just re-inhabited it, because the timeline of him building this on top, kind of this pleasure palace on top, doesn't really add up. And it's not really, I understand why you would use it as kind of like a pleasure palace fortress, because it's very hard to access. But constructing something on top of that in the short period of time that he did, it didn't really add up to me whilst I was on top of it myself. Another really interesting feature of Sigiriya Rock is there are two huge stone pores as you go up the rock. So there's a halfway point, as you said, there's like a halfway base point, and at that halfway base point, just before you summit the last kind of, I would say 50 meters or so, there's two massive pores. They're bigger than me. Now, I believe off the top of my head, they only contain three toes, three fingers, whatever you want to call them, 3 digits, which is interesting. That makes it seem a little bit more reptilian, because they call it lion rock, because they believe that those pores were leonine in the past, and there was actually, they believe, a massive leonine head on it as well, which obviously then you start to think, well, the Sphinx is leonine, and so it has that connection as well. They've only got 3 digits, I believe, so it seems more reptilian to me, whatever the design was, but they're massive. So there's a whole host of mysteries surrounding this site. And anyway, so when I got back from this site, I was looking it up and I found an article from Amelia Sparavigna talking about the alignment and how she believes it was a deliberate alignment. It's on the east to west axis, and it's a 9 degrees inclination. And she believes it was a deliberate alignment to the sunset of the zenithal sun. So when the sun is at its highest, okay, it was an alignment to that time of the year, the sunset on that day. I found that fascinating. So I actually got in touch with her and we started an email exchange, and I asked if I could use her alignment theory in my article. And she's a great person. She kind of I'm a nobody. So I was just a random person emailing her, asking if I could use her work. She said, go ahead, use it. And that started off a kind of chain of events. So I ended up delving into the alignment a little bit more. And long story short, the alignment seems to be related to a set of, how can I call it? A set
meteors.
Exactly, a set of meteor streams, right? And it allows you, using this alignment, using the knowledge of this alignment, to track those meteor streams throughout the year and throughout the years. And I personally don't know if it's fact or fiction, but I personally believe the Sigiriya complex, like many other megaliths, one functional element to them, I think there was more than one, but one functional element to them was this tracking of celestial objects, specifically meteor streams, because of the knowledge that the past people had of massive cataclysmic events. This is not a new idea. This is quite an old idea. I think Immanuel Velikovsky in the late 20th century or in the mid 20th century was talking about catastrophism. Randall Carlson talks about catastrophism. Graham Hancock, the Comet Research Group, has been set up recently. It's this idea that throughout Earth's history, and quite recent history as well, catastrophism goes in tension with gradualism. Gradualism is a kind of the idea that geological processes happen very slowly over time. And catastrophism is the idea that gradualism happens, but occasionally and very suddenly a catastrophic event occurs, usually from a cosmic impact, but that can relate to volcanic eruptions and earthquakes as well. They all seem to be interlinked. And that changes the kind of timeline of history, the geological formations, the cultures. And I believe a lot of these sites were set up with the ancient knowledge of this catastrophic history.
I have a couple of things. Okay, so I'm going to bring this up because I have spoken about this on the show. Now we need to take a break, and we'll get to that in a second. Maybe we won't take a break.
No, yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm rolling right now. So I'm down. Okay, so I'm going around the world, right? And I do some stuff in Egypt, and I noticed a shape. All right, so I just take note of the shape. I take some pictures of it, and then I go somewhere else, and then I see it again. I take some pictures of it, and then and I go somewhere else, and then and I wind up down to Amaramuru in Peru, which is crazy.
Wow.
And so I take pictures of that, and then I'm over at Pumapunku, and I'm taking pictures of the H blocks, and on the back of the H blocks, I see this symbol again, and then I go over to Tiwanaku, which isn't supposed to be any relation to Pumapunku, even though they're on the same friggin' street. So anyway, I see it again, and then I'm talking to Jason Quitt, and Jason Quitt brings this up and shows me this picture of this tomb and in Egypt. And I went, wait a minute, dude, I was just there. I took pictures of that, and I took pictures of that, and I showed it. He ended up writing a book about it. Okay. You sent me an image of what Jason and I noticed, and I'm going to pull it up here.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay. So here now, this is what is nuts. This is a repeating construction, megalithic, all around the world. And so right here at Aramumuru in Peru, the famous portal, right?
Yeah.
That's on the back of the H blocks.
Yes.
In Pumapunku. It's also the Temple of the Seven Gates in Karnak in Egypt. right? And here it is in Turkey, right? And it's all over, man. It's all over Egypt. Here's an example here, and then we have it in Japan, and it's this repeating thing. Now I know how I saw it or how I discovered it. I just happened to be at these places over a couple of year period, and I'm seeing it repeat. How did you make these connections?
Wow. Do you know, I actually can't pinpoint when specifically what made me come up with these connections. As I said, in January, I was going through Mexico. I went through Costa Rica and then into Peru. It was about a 3-month journey. And I guess I was noticing just subconsciously these kind of, I've never really thought about this before, honestly, but I was noticing subconsciously these doorways that led to nowhere. And I was noticing in Mexico, and then I wasn't really paying too much attention of them. And then in Peru, I saw them again. And I honestly, I think, do you know what it was? I read a book by Diana Pasolka, and it was, what was it called? I believe it was called Encounters. And this is a very weird connection, but she was talking about the kind of irrational elements to the phenomena and how they seem quite absurd and they don't really make a lot of sense. And at that time, when I was reading that part of that book, I was looking at my old photos, and my partner was saying, these are just doorways to nowhere. She was like, I wonder what they mean. I wonder what they were doing with them. And then suddenly I was like, yeah, these are absurd. They're nonsensical in a way. And I started to look into different sites that I had visited before and I'd not visited before across the world. And they literally crop up anywhere. They crop up in Italy as well. They crop up all over the globe.
They're all over the world. They're all I see them.
The world.
I can't escape them now.
No. And
they are doorways. I don't know what the magic word is. Open sesame. I don't know what I don't know what it is. But and I hate to use Stargate. Right. I hate to do, it just bothers me, but I don't have a better description. I don't have another word to use than that here. It seems that like Iglesia, like the church, like the cave, that seems
again, another great example. Yeah.
Yes. 100%. They've got the same thing there twice. And so anyway, that's what it seem, but nobody's got an explanation. Why would you, when you look at Aramumuru here, which by the way, I had a very spiritual experience after doing the ceremony there. But this is a doorway to nowhere, right? Yeah. And what's the purpose? What and to see this and this site, Sigiriya in Turkey, that's one of the most incredible examples of this repeating design. That's crazy.
Obviously the kind of widely accepted idea is that they had no functional purpose. They were symbolic, right? That's the kind of touted perspective on them, that they were symbolic of the culture that built them. It's just hard to, unless there's some type of Jungian collective unconscious type mechanism at work, which there could be, and I believe possibly that relates to this idea of this like kind of energetic intelligence. It's almost as if the people at these sites, and also I just want to point out, when I say a site, I'm not just talking about the architecture of the site, I'm talking about the geographic location of the site as well. I think that is really important in the kind of holistic understanding of these places, is not just the kind of stone. The stone is very, very important, the kind of architecture there. I also think the location of these sites is very, very important as well. It kind of begs the question, when these pop up all over the world, either there's a human or hominin information network at play, or there's a sort of ephemeral information network at play, which people seem to be tapping into at certain points in our history. And whether or not these sites were set up to elevate people's tapping into this kind of, I believe it was Chardin who talked about the noosphere and this kind of interconnection of information. It runs with, he ran it through, I think he was writing in the early 20th century, he was running it through the economy and technology and ideas and everything. And it's kind of, as we progress as a species and as the kind of reality keeps on rolling, everything starts to interconnect more and more. And I really like that idea. I'm fascinated with the idea of spaces, like not spaces in outer space, but just spaces in general. And the idea that there's this kind of underlying network of information that runs through reality that people can tap into at certain points under certain contexts. I believe that's where ritual was created, probably why psychedelics were created.
Everything, if you consider something as basic as 2 points and a line that connects them, right? We're all taught that very early on, right? Okay. 2 stars have a space in between them. 2 rocks in a stream have a space in between them. Our cells have a space in between them, right? There's space in between 2 points, but they're all connected. Everything. So what is in that? That's what that consciousness aspect of it, you know, is what you're suggesting. That's what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
What is connecting? What's in between, right?
Yeah,
those 2 points or people. 2 people have space in between them. I want to know about what that is.
So for us, I guess we're coming back round to this idea, but for the ancient people, they seem to be really at home with this idea, and there wasn't a stigma surrounding this idea, right? If we look at Peru, I think that's a common example we can both talk about. In Cusco, the Coricancha, if the listeners haven't been to Cusco, the Coricancha is kind of this, they call it the beating heart of Cusco. It's like the beating heart of Peru, really. Cusco was the Incan capital. Okay.
The center of everything.
Exactly, the center of everything, right? And then when the Spanish came, they kind of did what the Spanish used to do back then, and they kind of leveled everything and built churches and took all the gold and kind of changed the architecture around. And they built a church on top of the Coricancha, which was a massive megalithic building in the center of Cusco. Now, when I was in Cusco recently, I found a painting in the back of the Coricancha, and it related to something that I'd never heard about before, and it was called the Seke system. And when I saw it, it was one of those kind of light bulb moments where I thought they really knew what they did.
I stood in front of that painting for about 30 minutes.
That's exactly the same. We both lived the same moment there. So you have the whackers, which are the nodes, and they're the nodes in the network, and they relate to sacred sites. It could be a sacred cave, like Niapu Iglesia. It could be a sacred megalithic site, like the ones surrounding Cusco, like Kenko Chico and Tambo Machai. It could be anything. Any sacred site, okay, becomes a node, a waka. And then you have the kind of Seke lines running from the Coricancha to the Wakas, right? And for me, when I saw that, I thought this is almost like an innate, natural information network that we're still struggling to understand today. But these ancient people, they knew. And I'm going to say the Incas probably knew about it, but the people that came before them almost definitely knew about it as well. And they're probably
100%.
Do you know what
Freddie,
I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Now, when you stand at the center of the Coricancha, when you stand there and you look at that, right, and it's the center, you can see it all laid out. It's almost like it's not Freemasons. It's not like that.
Wow.
It's not, but it rings of secret knowledge. That's 100%. What it rings of. You're looking at that and you're like, this is some secret shit, man. This is some really knowledge
of something more than us.
It's heavy, man. It's heavy.
Pointing to something more than us. And I think
you can see all of it laid out, man. And you know what? You know what the funny part is? The Spanish left that alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
They left that alone. You're not going to mess with that. You're not. You can tell.
Yeah.
There's a certain zone. We can go and take all the gold. That's not bad. Messing with this. Right.
Yeah,
you can tell.
Yeah.
So check this out, Freddie. I pulled this up for you. So
amazing.
So here is the infamous H blocks. I'm walking around taking pictures of the H blocks, right, and having a good time. And then I walk around the back of the H blocks, and what's there? Whoop! Right there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, not one H block, right? It's like it's on the back of all of these different, and I'm walking around going, wait a minute here. So am I the only person seeing this? Right? There's another one. Look, right? And that's on the back of the look, there's another one. Right? And it's just the same. It's what is going on?
Do you know
why would you do that on the back of look? You see that?
When nobody's really gonna you're doing that, and that takes a lot of effort to do. Anyone that's worked with stone, that is extremely difficult now, let alone back then. So the makers of that stone, the masons of that stone, has gone to the extent to indent that doorway to nowhere, tiny doorway to nowhere in the back of that stone, which who are they expecting to see it back then, really?
So I go across the street to Tiwanaku, right? Which is it's pretty glorious when you think about it, because you get out your empanada and your coffee, right, or your soda.
Yeah.
Before you finish your empanada, you're at Tiwanaku. It's right there, right?
Yeah,
it's like, but they're not related. Oh, really? So I'm walking around Tiwanaku, listening to this dogma, right? Thank goodness I was with Brian Forrester. But you listen to the archaeology. You don't want to offend the Bolivians. It's a foreign country, and I get that. I understand. And it's actually pretty treacherous. So you want to stay in bounds. I get that, right? But I'm walking around Tiwanaku. It's not supposed to be related, right? Okay, right? Okay. And then I see this. So I find these stones, which are sitting out in the middle of nowhere. And I walk around the back of the stone, and I'm I'm walking on a path, and I walk past this. Boop. Right? And I was like, wait. It doesn't matter what country you go to, right? There it is. And you're saying it has no relation to Pumapunku or Japan or Turkey or Karnak, the Temple of the Seven Gates. So anyway, and my mind was completely blown.
It's
And was on the back of this stone. So that's the back, and that's the other side.
Do you know, it's unbelievable. As you said, it's everywhere. I think it's almost like a signature of something. It's the reason why I kind of relate it to the Seke system and this idea that there are kind of underlying networks of information that run through the kind of causal fabrics of relationship is the fact that they obviously appear in all of these places, but it's not necessarily a functional in our generic term of functional. It doesn't necessarily have a obvious functional element to it. If there was a functional element to it, it would slightly make sense about why it's cropped up in all of these places, because we're all people at the end of the day, and there's probably a certain amount of things we can think of in a certain amount of time over a certain amount of space. But the fact that they're nonsensical and they're kind of absurd in their nature just reminds me of this, like, people are over time tapping into something. And now I sent you an image of, I believe it's like a causal tree. It looks like a totem pole, and it goes all the way up, starting from a single point.
Oh yeah.
It might be right at the start. Yes, that one, right? So this is just something I created for myself, because my process of writing is basically just a process of discovery for myself. I write to understand. That's the way I do it. I've always struggled with speaking, but I really enjoy writing. Okay. And I also love to make diagrams of the things I'm writing about, because there's kind of a idea in teaching called dual coding, where you code an image with text and it helps you kind of remember it, like a heuristic, like a mental heuristic. And when I was thinking about this kind of informational network, I was listening to a few people speak, and I was reading a few kind of pieces of work. And there's a guy called Yosha Bak. He's a computer scientist. He's way more than a computer scientist, but I'll just say he's a computer scientist for now. And he talks about this kind of underlying causal structure in reality. And it got me thinking, what does he mean by an underlying causal structure in reality? So then I started to think about it a little bit more, and I kind of came up with this concept just to help think about it. So you can imagine it from bottom to top, the start of time to kind of current, maybe end of time, I guess you could say. You start off with a single point. They say we started off with a singularity, then the Big Bang occurred, and about 11 billion years ago, and then everything started to excel from there, right? So at the start was a single point. You can kind of extrapolate that further into a single cell. Then over time, kind of double cell, okay? 1 and 1 creates a connection between both of them. Okay, so things start to get, in a causal sense, a little bit more complicated, but not too complicated. Okay, then you move up, and that starts to become a little bit more complicated. The mesh network structure seems to relate to things like ecosystems, where there are multiple interrelated components at play. You've got obviously the environment, you've got the species in the ecosystem, you've got everything surrounding that. They all seem to be naturally occurring. And then it got me thinking, the next step is kind of this introduction of modern technology, which makes it appear like we're moving into exponentially connected areas, right? And I've used the example here of Moore's law, which is the kind of way people express exponential technology. I look at this and I think I was actually wrong when I made this. I honestly think the piece at the top has been here since the beginning. And I believe that piece at the top, this kind of exponentially interconnected nature, cause and effect nature of reality, has been here for thousands and thousands of thousands and thousands of years.
You know, that's interesting. You could almost, and it would make perfect sense. If you doubled this and flipped it over,
Oh.
and you had the single point in the middle,
Yeah.
and then the double, and then the mesh, and then the Moore's law at the beginning.
Do you know, one of the fascinating things is with the Moore's law, the exponential technology, it almost becomes so interconnected, we move back into a singularity.
That's right.
So
it's entropy. It's entropy.
It's the serpent eating its tail.
Yeah.
It loops back around. And it's almost like and the reason why there's a straight line on time, that's a questionable retro causality, going back in time, that's questionable as well. I'm not going to deny, I don't know if time is fundamental, and I don't know, I don't have the kind of, it's about, what's the time? It's about 4:30 in the morning. So I've had mad conversations, but I can't get into the retro causality of time at the moment. But the reason why I've done the complexity scale on the right as a kind of squiggly double-ended arrow is that I don't believe this is linear. I don't believe complexity is linear. I believe, like the rise and fall of civilization, like catastrophism, okay, there's orders and there's kind of disorders and there's peaks and troughs. I believe the same happens with complexity and the same happens with causality. And this is just made for me to kind of understand it a little bit better. But I really believe this has some relation to doorways to nowhere. Why were these people making these doorways to nowhere all those tens of thousands of years ago, or thousands of years ago, if whatever perspective you want to look at it? And I think they were tapping it. Have you ever heard of Michael Hofstadter?
Yes.
Michael Hofstadter, the artist, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love his work. I absolutely adore his work. I think it's fantastic, just from an artist perspective. But I love using that as kind of a mental model to think about what this kind of energetic intelligence could be. And that's the kind of that's the overlap between this and then the phenomena and things like that. Because who knows whether or not the phenomena is, and by phenomena I'm talking about paranormal activity, supernatural, supranatural activity. I'm talking about everything in between. You know what I'm talking about when I say that, right? So I just think there's certainly an overlap between this kind of energetic intelligence that people seem to be tapping into, and that seems to change. It's changing the course of history because people are making these megalithic structures and they're going out of their way to kind of harvest the rock and haul that rock hundreds and hundreds of meters up. I don't know how they done it, but they clearly were believing in something very powerful. And I don't know if these doorways, if we're going to pin a functional element to these doorways, I don't know if these doorways were a means of accessing. You were calling them a portal, right? I don't know if they were a means of accessing this informational network that then led to ideation, that led to these nonsensical elements that reoccurred over and over a time. You see it with staircases carved into the middle of a wall, which make no functional sense. Obviously, there's always a kind of mainstream symbolic explanation of them. You see it all over the world, henges all over the world, pyramids.
Well, it's true though, and if you stop and just try to understand the effort that it would take to carve into granite some crazy shape, right? And so I don't know if it's going to take you a year or 2 or 10, but instead of guys that did that, historically speaking, got eaten, right? You're the dude, right? You can't be out on the Serengeti, right? And go, wait, stop. I got this idea. you're gonna die.
Yeah.
Right? You're gonna die.
Yeah.
So so what was it that was so important for them to carve these doorways, these staircases, these windows to nowhere for no apparent reason, to haul a 50-ton megalithic block to the top of a mountain and then haul up 20 more? Right? What was the reason for that? And align them perfectly, astronomical, leveled, square, perfect, instead of feeding your family.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the part of it that and Freddie, just to repeat once again, nobody knows why. The Spanish show up. Oh, this is cool. You build this? No, man, it was here when we got here. Don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know. It's just the pyramids in Egypt, right? The Great Pyramid. No, nothing.
Yeah.
How is it possible to have, Ollantay Tambo, Sacsayhuaman, Baalbek, Stonehenge, right? It doesn't matter. Pick one. We don't know, and nobody does.
I've got a few different points, a few different ways I want to go about this, but just because of the kind of metaphor you mentioned with the Serengeti, I read a book recently by, I believe it was Professor James Madden, Unidentified Flying Hyperobjects. Absolutely fascinating book. It's kind of a philosophical look at the phenomenon. The reason why that reminded me of it, he spoke in that book about something called relevance sorting. And we all, day to day, we all kind of sort out what input comes into our mind through our kind of relevance scale, what we find relevant. When you're in the Serengeti trying to survive, there are a few things that you find relevant and a few things you don't find relevant. When you're in a kind of nice, comfortable environment, I've got 4 walls around me, I've got some coffee next to me, there are other things that you find relevant. I think maybe because of just the shift in time and the shift in culture, when we go to these sites, traditionally, we miss a key piece of data that's at these sites simply because we don't know what we're looking for. It's not relevant to us anymore. It's very hard for us to see. I've got a kind of a pen friend, an email friend called Bob Bowen, and he hit the nail on the head. It's to be or not to be is becoming to see or not to see. And when we honestly, he's a fantastic guy. I've never met him, but he like emails me about my articles and we discuss some of this. So because it's hard, none of my friends or family really are into any of this. So it's quite hard to kind of build up a network to speak to people, and you don't want to develop ideas in isolation as well. So it's very good to kind of speak to people about it. But I'll go on another tangent in a second because there's something really interesting I want to talk about regarding the kind of nature of the sites themselves. But when I was in Machu Picchu, the first time I was there, I believe it was 2019. You've been to Machu Picchu, right? It's a absolutely breathtaking site. Talk about, it's famous for a reason, right? Talk about energy. I don't mind using that word when it comes to Machu Picchu. Me and my friend was at the kind of summit of Machu Picchu, looking out over the landscape. We were seeing the kind of Huayna Picchu. It just looked fantastic, right? It was a clear day. We got lucky. We were on the top terrace and it was quite empty. There was a man, I would say about 2 terraces below us, and he was in a meditative pose, right? And we were standing there for about 10 minutes and the sun was coming up at this time. I was just at the corner. I was just interested what he was doing. He was meditating. And I would say about 5 minutes in, he started to writhe. His eyes kind of bulged back. His tongue was coming out, and he'd completely zoned out of everything around him. And he was in his own world, right? Whatever he was feeling at that point, I don't know if he was on psychedelics. It didn't actually remind me of anything that I've seen regarding that. It seemed like he had gone so far into whatever that site could provide to him that he was just in it, and he was right. And it must have been about 5 minutes, to the point where me and my friend were going to check if he was medically okay at one point, right? So at the time, we didn't, and we kind of left it. Typical, we just kind of left it. And then I look back at that, and I think, in the framework of relevance sorting, for him, what he was feeling, what he was seeing was real, was 100% real. And whether or not you want to say anything about the phenomena, about these sites, about what people feel, it's real. If you feel it, it's real, right? It exists. You said Jimmy, you've had kind of sacred experiences, Nyapu Iglesia, Maramuru, right? I have also had some very, very interesting experiences at some of these sites. And it's very hard to describe them to people because they weren't there at that time. And it's very difficult for them to put their kind of relevance scale into that niche, right? And I just think it's a really important point that we are probably missing a lot at these sites because of what we can't and do not know how.
For sure, 100%. And when Freddie, when I tell people about that stuff, I suddenly find myself sounding like some new age hippie from 1970 that has a pyramid over my bed, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that pyramids sharpen razor blades or keep fruit fresh. I'm not going there, but I sound like that. Mm-hmm. And it's very, like you said, it's very difficult to explain. At Muru, I've had things happen all over the place, mm-hmm. but specifically that site. So we go through and we have a shaman and we do the whole ceremony. We're burning stuff and tobacco and all that stuff that that they do. Okay, so anyway, but I had the opportunity to sit and kneel first. So I go through and we all go through that. Anyway, at the end of the ceremony, and by the way, there's a tunnel on the back of the mountain that is sealed off. Yeah, they've sealed it off. A couple of 100 years ago, you can't. It's sealed off. The villagers, no. People were literally teleporting and disappearing. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so that's sealed off. Everybody's leaving, and I'm there alone with a friend of mine. Everything's cool. Everything's fine, mm-hmm. right? And all of a sudden, this static electricity, this buzzing, comes in, and dude, it's going up my feet, right up my leg, my arm, my hair, and I'm like, "What? Do you feel that?" I do. I'm like, "What the hell, man?" And I'm standing there for like 2 minutes. It was now look, and I say this out loud, mm-hmm. and I sound crazy. I do. I sound crazy. Peace, love, dude. Grateful Dead, dude. Grateful Dead, dude. Jerry Garcia. No. It was a physical sensation that overtook me and then passed. Now, if it was just me, okay. Something's going on. It was, I had bad melon for breakfast, whatever. But she's going through it at the same time. Yeah. Right. And we both felt it. And we both just kind of stood there, like, okay, let's ride this out. This is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And then it went away. That's why that site is sacred.
Yeah.
The ancients knew that.
Yep.
The ancients knew that. Now, I've pulled up, Freddie, your information dissemination map. And what I find interesting about this, and I kind of want to break it down, and
Sure.
we'll go through this really quick. I've had it up for a while because I wanted everybody to just kind of absorb it. But at the top, years before present, that magical number, 200,000 years, which is us, right? We just appeared out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting about this is you have the Dennisovan here. And the Dennisovan, which for people that are just now getting into this research, they think that they don't jump into what Dennisovan is. Dennisovan is a modern discovery. This is not something that was in the history books 200 years ago. No. This is so before you think, well, okay, so Cro-Magnon, people hear these words and they use them. Neanderthal, they're using these words too freely. Yeah. And it's the same thing with Dennisovan, that there was nothing else to be discovered. There's nothing new here. And then boom, Dennisovan just pops up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it is incredible. And speaking to how recent it was, the Denisova cave in the Altai region of Siberia, it was only discovered and excavated in 2007, and the information was only released in 2010, the first information.
That's it. People need to wrap your head around that for a second.
14 years, right? This
14 years
been out there. And the type of research that needs to go into looking at ancient hominids is extremely difficult, because I believe what they were working with in the case of Denisova cave was a tiny finger bone, a little finger bone, right? And they were extracting the DNA from that, and they were looking at the structure of the proteins and the structure of the DNA to see if it matches with what we know of Neanderthal and what we know of Homo sapien. And it didn't match, hence why they then found that it was a new species of hominin, the Denisovans. There's a whole host of kind of allure and mysteries surrounding the Denisovans. There's a researcher called Andrew Collins.
Oh, I know Andrew well. Sure.
And yeah, he writes about that. He's kind of really the only figure that I've come across that's really writing about the Denisovans consistently, and I find his work fascinating. He talks about the bracelet, the kind of the green bracelet that was found there, and the tiny hole that seemed to be drilled into it that doesn't really at all fit into our kind of standard timeline. He talks about the implementation of music, the first musical instruments, the bone flutes that were found there. He talks about the cosmic symbology relating to Cygnus, the star Cygnus, the star constellation. And all of that, he believes, pegs from the Denisovans, and then pass that information on to us, the Homo sapiens, because we interbred with the Denisovans just like we interbred with the Neanderthals, just like the Neanderthals interbred with the Denisovans. There was a lot of mixing going on. And when there's mixing of everything, culture, okay, as well as kind of features and everything, right? So the reason how I got into making this kind of information map, and this is a work in progress. I've added to this in the past couple of days. So everything I say, it could change, right? So I'm not married to this at all. This is literally like a working hypothesis and a working map. I've just never seen it mapped out like this before. And for my own understanding, this is why I've tried to map it out in this way. So I almost want to reverse and start most recently at the bottom of the map and work my way back up to the Denisovans, if that's okay, because one of the kind of interesting connections that I point to, again, don't know if it's true, but I would love for more research to be put into this. is the connection between the Masonic tradition, the Freemasons that we know now, and Göbekli Tepe, because that is
well done. Well, okay. I want you to continue that thought.
Mhm.
This is my connecting of the dots. Freemasons will argue this with me directly, but I think you're 100% correct. I think that those traditions and that knowledge was handed down prior to Göbekli Tepe, through Göbekli Tepe, into Mesopotamia and Giza, through to today. Those traditions are that old and older. That's my take. They're going to say no. I don't give a crap. I see that as the way it's laid out. Continue.
100%. Where to start with this? I first released an article about this idea in 2020, and it was an intuition. I was reading a lot of different material. I was reading the Book of Haran by Christopher Knight and Robert Lomas, which talks about in detail the Masonic tradition. And they're two researchers, university researchers, that actually joined the Freemasons to learn more about their tradition.
It's a great book. It's a great book.
It's a fascinating book. And they made a connection between the grooved ware people of kind of Neolithic Europe and the Phoenicians of the Levant region in kind of around Lebanon and Syria and Israel. And they made that connection. And then I was reading work by Andrew Collins, and I was reading work by obviously Graham Hancock. And there's another work called, there's another researcher called Professor Martin Sweatman. And he wrote a book called Prehistory Decoded. And that to me, again, was another kind of mind-blowing book, because here is he's a proper academic. He's like the lab coat scientist, right? I believe he's a mechanical engineer, does statistics. And he pointed to a connection, like a very, very, very clear connection. And he statistically backed it up between the symbology, the cosmic symbology of Göbekli Tepe and of Egypt. So there's that connection between Göbekli Tepe and Egypt. But he also pointed to a cosmic symbological connection between cave art in 50,000 years plus, Lascaux Cave, Chauvet, all around the world, to Göbekli Tepe. So as soon as I kind of looked at that, and I looked at what Andrew Collins was speaking about, this whole map started to develop in my head. And it was only recently I got into this idea of historical network theory when I read Niall Ferguson's Square and the Tower, where he talks about how networks have existed over long periods of time. And he kind of juxtaposes the tower, which is like the hierarchical order, with the square, which is the marketplace of ideas, the network. So he talks about that tension between the square and the tower. But in it, he really pushes the idea that these networks are powerful and they exist over long periods of time. And we know networks exist over long periods of time. Look at trade networks like the Silk Road. And then look at the Illuminati.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
You can go right there. You can go right there. And if we take a really hard look at the timeline from here going backwards, where we keep there's this midway point that keeps coming up, and it doesn't matter what the culture is. It doesn't matter what the site is. It doesn't matter what the cosmology is. It doesn't matter about the oral tradition, but we always land on the same date, 10,500 BC. 10,500 BC. 10,000, and it doesn't look. It could be Edfu, Abydos, the origin story. Where does that go? That's 12,000 years ago, 10,000 BC,
where did
right?
Atlantis go to?
Atlantis, Göbekli Tepe, right,
exactly.
right.
Everything goes there, yeah. everything goes there. I
The
think
Puma Punku and the alignment at Tiwanaku of the Sun Gate. It's just like, wait a minute here. Something. If that date is so solid, right, of 10,500 BC, and I'll scroll back here in your calendar. There it is, right there, 10,800.
Yeah,
everything kicks off.
Yeah.
Right. And if that is indeed the case, then that means that there was intelligence before.
Exactly.
Right. That's all that
Exactly.
says.
Exactly.
It doesn't suggest that everything started at 3000 BC in Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
We're pushing back this clock millennia, tens and tens and tens of thousands of years to just another intelligent civilization that was upright, fully functioning, and intelligent. And that's it.
And I guess two things. One of the things I first want to address is when I first released that article, a lot of the pushback I got from that article, it wasn't about the format of it. It was more people were confused and they thought I was saying the Masons had something to do with the construction of Göbekli Tepe. And so I re-released an article a few weeks ago, last week actually, just a revision of my original article. And that's why I ended up creating this map, just so I could very clearly show people the direction of the information dissemination that I was pointing to. Because if I'm being perfectly honest, I didn't do a good job in my first article trying to explain it. I kind of got lost in the weeds a little bit with looking at the grooved ware people that Knight and Lomas was pointing to and trying to connect that to the Denisovans and then to Göbekli Tepe. But then I intuited a connection, and then I really sat down over, I'd say, a period of 3 weeks, and I broke down why I believed in that intuition. And this map is what came from it. This map is, if you could see how this map started on the paper, it was wild. But this map is what came of it. Now, the kind of second thing I want to say is that we know information passes through networks from node to node. That's not an idea. That's not a revolutionary idea that networks pass information over time and space, right? I think why people find it so difficult is because they're worried that you're taking away from the local inhabitants of these sites, and that can obviously be a very touchy subject for a lot of people, right? What I suggest, and it's not new to me, but what I believe is that, again, information and ideas don't exist in a vacuum. It takes a combination of minds to come up with these great ideas. It could have taken the information from, let's say, the makers of Göbekli Tepe, and then they've mixed that information with the local inhabitants of the Egyptian kind of around Helwan and then around Giza, and then the pyramids crop up, right? I'm not saying that necessarily it's the exact same people the whole way through, but I think that kind of should open up the doorway to a lot of people thinking about this a lot, because I think the diversity of thought, looking at just each one of these nodes on the map, could really help explain it or disprove it. And I'm happy with either, but I think
you're right about that. You're on the right track.
Yeah.
I have done as much research into this as just about anybody. And here's my take. The researchers that have been very vocal about it, like Graham Hancock and so forth, Andrew Collins and Robert Schock and Randall Carlson and even Linda Moulton Howe and so forth, they missed an opportunity to truly explain the significance of Göbekli Tepe, because they get lost in the pushback, right? And they want to fight, and they want the skeptics and this and that, and also people not asking the right questions of them. So the opportunity gets lost. You're absolutely right that you ended up having to fight and push back, right? Instead of everybody just trying to understand. And you probably weren't asked the right questions in your own head to turn around and get it down correctly on paper. But
100%.
So this is my point. This is where everybody has just missed the boat. First off, any skeptic that wants to, and I say this without compassion, okay? Any skeptic that wants to say, no, it's Stone Age man, you're not giving them enough credit, is wrong. They have nothing, absolutely zero, to base a statement like that on. They have zero evidence. They have nothing to back that up. Somebody like me that researches this, and I look at this, I clearly see an advanced situation of governance, of control, of agriculture, of engineering, of design, of art, and everything that encompasses a fully functioning civilization. That's what Göbekli Tepe represents. It doesn't represent anything else but that. You cannot tell me that some dude and his wife foraging for seeds in the dirt for a meal one day just goes, let's quarry some stones. It doesn't happen that way. It just doesn't. And that knowledge was passed down from somebody before them. They were taught. Steve Jobs didn't invent the iPhone. He didn't. This is handed down over generation. What it took to get to this point was a lot of work, and it was generational. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing with Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, and certainly, and I speak loudly about this. My knowledge is so extent on this, and it's so frustrating that people don't get it. They simply just don't get it. There are stone tablets, Freddie. There are stone tablets. There are writings. There are things all over this planet that tell the origin story that is right there in front of us. And the anthropologists of the world, the archaeologists of the world, and the skeptics of the world, who are the loudest. They're the smallest group, the Michael Shermers of the world. There's only a couple of them. There's like two. Two. They get together once a month and they talk their shit. But they're the loudest. They don't have anything to back up anything that they say. The answer is always no. Based on what? Were you there? Were you there?
And that's a really important point. Were you there? Because if we look at the people that were there and what they say, and the only real way that we can know that is through what they inscribe on stone and through the mythology that was passed through the cultures, right? So if you look at comparative mythology from Rudolf Steiner, von Deschend, Santillana and Hamlet's Mill, Joseph Campbell, you've got Randall Carlson doing it in the modern day, obviously Graham Hancock. They all say, at the very least, this number 7 keeps cropping up. 7 sages, right? We have the sages of Owans, we have the sages of Kukulkan, we have the sages of Sekrops, we have the Saptarishi in the Vedic scriptures, right? We have these sages that seem to, at the very least, be a symbolic representation of the information that came before them and was passed on to them. And just so happens that in the mythology of all of these places, from Egypt to India to Mesopotamia to Mexico to Peru, this information comes at a point of cataclysm, right? So it's not only when you start comparing the trouble with myth is I kind of view myth like a teardrop shape, right? A teardrop shape with 2 concentric circles in the middle. It has 3 layers, right? You have the kind of narrative of myth, the entertainment, the story of myth that allows the myth to be passed on generation to generation. That's why I kind of view it as like a teardrop shape. It's like water flowing through the generations, right? And the narrative is what carries that myth and is what kind of ensures that the next generation enjoys it and passes it on. They add bits to the story, but they take those core elements and pass it on, right? The second layer, the second innermost layer, kind of relates to the metaphor, the analogy, the wisdom that you can draw on a surface type level from the myth. Okay. And that's what keeps people interested in it. That's what, there's this kind of story about greed or story about pride, or there's a little bit more kind of to the story than meets the eye, right? And it allows you to unpick it. Then at the center is like a pure bead of wisdom, right? And that takes tacit knowledge, that takes explicit knowledge, that takes a level of esoteric knowledge that you've had to take a lot of time to learn. Some people are initiated to learn it. But at the center of a lot of these myths, sacred geometry, cosmology, myth about masonry, and it takes a level of deeper understanding to access these myths. On the surface level, they're just stories. But on the deeper level, they have a lot of really interesting and potent information to extract from them. And that is the real reason why they're passed on generation to generation. The sages that pass that myth on, the sages that produce the Dharma, okay, that unfortunately becomes dogma eventually, they know about that pure bead of wisdom at the heart of that myth. And that is why they pass it on to the next generation. Now I believe that's the reason why. If we just take it, I know we're running out of time. Are we okay for time, or?
Yeah, keep going.
You go, right. So there's a site called Ishinohoden in Japan. And I only found out about this site because I was tutoring English, and I had a lot of adult Japanese students I was teaching. And I had this really lovely kind of older lady that I was tutoring, and she lived near this site, and she told me about it. And she was saying, because she was interested in my writing as well, because we would talk about these things. And she was saying, nobody knows about this site. Nobody knows why it was built, Ishinohoden. It is, I've never been, but from the images, it is absolutely mind-blowing. They call it the floating stone. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the myth surrounding that, there was, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but there is not much known about it, but there was a kami, which is like a semi-mythical builder god, right? And his name was Oka Nunishu, right? He, again, was said to have come to that land after a time of immense flooding and immense disease. And he kind of started to build these projects in the land. But because of unrest in neighboring territories, he wasn't able to complete a lot of the projects. Again, that doesn't really sound like just pure mythology. If we look at it, it sounds like if you're a god, if you're a builder god, the unrest in the neighboring territory shouldn't really bother you that much, right? But the fact that that did, and that stopped him, and I believe it was left unfinished, Ishinohoden, points to the fact that it probably was built by someone that came there after a time of cataclysm, and they built it for a specific reason. Now, I'm just saying this because I collaborated with Emilia Sparavigna, the Italian physicist, and I don't believe this was done before. I sent her the information about this site, and she ran it through her alignment programs, whatever software she does. She is brilliant. And she obviously collaborated with me just off the kindness of her own heart, because she's fascinated by this as well. And she found an alignment of that, again, to the new moon, which suggests high tides, low tides. So that then you can extrapolate further transoceanic voyages. Whoever built that had knowledge of these transoceanic voyages. And once you start getting knowledge of transoceanic voyages and the information that's needed to conduct that, the world is your oyster. It's like transoceanic voyages pre-European was never really spoken about before.
What? And you have the boat stone in Japan.
Oh, exactly.
That is one of the craziest things. And so when you and you would think that and I'm not saying this in a funny ha way, but Japan, China, ancient cultures, very organized and historically, just kept things in order, and wrote things. Nobody knows anything.
Nobody knows anything.
Nobody knows, and that is one of the ginormous megalithic stones, and it's beautiful granite. And then you flip that over, and you look at something like Baalbek. Now, it's too easy of a target, right? Baalbek, Lebanon. It's too easy. Why? It's unexplainable. There is no explanation for that. I want somebody to go, okay, Jimmy, this is how it was done. So check this out. But a skeptic can't. Okay, so how did they move? Well, they moistened palm trees. They took the timber with water and they expanded it. No, they did not, dude. Stop. I don't know if it's supernatural. I don't know if it's aliens. I don't know if they brought in Merlin, the magician, and they levitated. I don't know. But your version of it is not how it happened. All right. So that's it. And you see this repeated all over the world. When you go, we're off of the network now. We're just on free time. So we'll take a couple minutes and then we'll wrap up.
Amazing.
But when you go to the top of Ollantaytambo or Machu Picchu is another good example, actually. Forget about Sacsayhuaman. That's too easy. Again, it's like Baalbek. It's too easy of a target. But you go to the top of Machu Picchu or Ollantaytambo, and you go to the Sun Temple at the top. You're already in treacherous land. You're on the side of a mountain, crazy steep, high altitude. You're all of that, and you go up those steps and the terraces, and it's so gorgeous, man. It's so beautiful, and it's so megalithic and everything. And after all of that, you get to the top. You round the corner, and boom, you're looking at those 5 or 6 giant, it's like, what? And you look down, and you're like, how? Somebody explain this to me. This doesn't make any sense. It's at the top of Machu Picchu. All of the houses at Machu Picchu with the gabled roofs, right? Okay, all right, I can make sense. All right. I'm okay with that. You go into what they call the town square, right? And you round the corner and you look, everybody's off doing their own thing. And I'm standing there looking at these giant bus-sized stones, right? Right. Perfectly. Yeah. And then with those 3 windows on the far side.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And you look at the stonework and you're just like, and everybody's not paying attention. I'm lost in this, man.
Yeah.
And just explain that to me. Explain it. Just tell me how. That's all I want to know. Tell me how.
Do you know, I don't want to keep you too long, but one of the things that I wanted to touch on, but I mean, hopefully we can do this again in the future because this has been absolutely fantastic. I've really enjoyed this. But
yeah, I can't wait to have you back.
Oh, I appreciate that. So, thank you so much, Jimmy. Just one of the things I wanted to touch upon is pulling it all back to this kind of this energetic intelligence, right? When you look at tectonic movements, right, you have sudden slips, which are earthquakes, which we all know about, and they're more studied, right? Then you have something called like episodic waves, and they're low frequency. Seismic activity like earthquake, very high frequency. Episodic waves are very low frequency, and they can exist over a very long time period. They can occur, right? There's really interesting crossover between tectonic movements, megalithic sites, and I'm just going to say consciousness. Consciousness is obviously a very, very broad topic, but the reason why I say that is twofold. There was a researcher called Dr. Darrell Treffert, and he recently died. It's like he was quite an older gentleman, but he was amazing. I wrote about him in one of my articles talking about genetic memories, and it was speaking about, he was an expert in savantism, and he was a neuroscientist. And specifically, he looked at accidental savantism, where somebody did not start off their life as a savant, but then something triggered them in their life, usually an accident like brain trauma, and whatever rewiring occurred, they became a savant in a certain area, right? His research and research out of a university in Sydney suggested that low frequencies, about 1 hertz, could increase your ability to problem solve. So directly,
one hertz,
as low as 1 hertz, when it's directly applied to, obviously you have the pads.
That's a pretty slow cycle. That's one cycle per second.
Very, very slow. My article on ancient origins goes into it a little bit more. And to be honest, there's probably new research out at the moment. This was written.
That's a cycle. 16 cycle is 40 cycles. 60 cycles is like below human hearing. You can feel it.
Yeah.
16 cycles, you can feel it.
Yeah.
1 cycle. Wow, that would be like a thump.
It's nothing. I don't know. Barely recognizable, right? And that's the point I'm trying to make, is that these sites seem to be built. If you look at the Ring of Fire, a lot of these sites seem to, which is the most seismically active place in the world, the Ring of Fire, right? Runs from New Zealand, Pacific coast, up and around North America, back down the coast of Mexico to Peru and Chile, right? A lot of these sites are located around there. I just wonder the connection between seismic activity and specifically these episodic tremors, these low frequency, long duration tremors, and megalithic sites and the creation of megalithic sites. Now, there's loads of places. I don't want to keep you too long, but there's the Gaia hypothesis, Lovelock, and then that was championed by Volk later, kind of looks at the Earth as one giant interconnected organism, right? I just wonder what the connection is between that and things like the phenomena and things like these megalithic sites being built. I'm not trying to say that is the reason why they were built. I am just pointing to the interesting connection between the effects that has on consciousness, and obviously everything about us is electric. There's a researcher called Michael Levin who's doing fantastic research in bioelectricity at the moment, and his kind of idea is that consciousness originates from obviously the neurons in the mind, but the cells in the body as well has something to do with the effect that it has on your consciousness, your conscious experience. Who knows what this electromagnetic activity that's being released by the seismic movements of the Earth is doing to our brains, and who knows what that kind of has on this underlying causal structure that seems to be running through the fabric of our reality. Like it's like a very interesting point that I'm in the middle of writing an article on it. It's called The Fault with Fault Lines, and I'm just trying to explore that a little bit more, that avenue. I don't want to, I'm not reducing everything to that, but I think that is one element of a completely complex system of kind of how this all interrelates.
Freddie, amazing show tonight, my man. I look forward to the next one. We've got your Substack up. Is that the best way for everybody to chase you down?
Yeah, my Substack. I have an Instagram that I made just for this show because I've only had a personal Instagram, and I thought, you know what, it's time that I make an Instagram for my kind of research and writing as well. It is Fred with a double D, Levy. So it's my name but missing the IE, and then it's APIF, which stands for Ancient Past Interconnected Future, and obviously is a play on words for Epiphany as well. So it's that either of those two. I think I've got one follower on that Instagram account at the moment. So and that's just my friend who's a journalist. So he's supporting me. So and as I said, I'm still really young in this game. Just between me and you, Jimmy, I kind of had imposter syndrome when Michelle reached out to me. I almost didn't reply because I've only been releasing my stuff publicly for about 4 years. And obviously, this is the next logical step for releasing your work into the public, is talking about it. But when it came up, it was almost such a shock that I almost ignored it. At first, I thought it was a joke. And then I was like looking at it and I was like, oh no, Jimmy Church is very real. And I started to look at you a little bit. And so, yeah, honestly, I've said thanks before and I'll say thanks again. It is like, it means so much to like a researcher who's just coming up to be asked to talk about their work. So thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And Freddie, just keep it up. Okay. And I look forward to our next conversation, man. Tonight was perfect.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. Enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy your travels if you're going on them.
I'm having dinner and going to bed. You enjoy the rest of your day. You're over in the UK.
Yeah,
I'll talk to you, Freddie.
Yeah. See you later, Jimmy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a perfect show tonight. Freddie Levy, and we've got his Substack up. And you can go and check out all of his articles. You guys know, you see me do this show every single day. You know what a good time I just had. That was absolutely perfect. What am I doing tomorrow night on the show? Tomorrow night is, Susie Hansen's on with us tomorrow night. We're going to be talking about her life of ET contact. All of that and much more. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Genocide. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Dex. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm yours, Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night, all I've got is go Backley Tappy.